What's up, everybody? It's Alan's Movie Talk. Back at it again. Just got back from seeing Smile 2, so let's talk about it. Just for reference, I am someone who enjoyed the first movie, but I didn't really overly love it. I liked the characters, I liked the themes, I liked some of the way that it set up the jump scares, but I just wasn't as high on it as as other people were. But with all that being said, I did like the movie. But to me, this sequel is far and away superior than that original film. The characters, the way they build tension, the way they deal with the themes of trauma, addiction, um, you know, the way that they do the scares, everything to me was elevated to new levels in this film and done way more effectively than they were in the first film. The first thing with this film, obviously, that was a huge standout and is a specific detail, was the character of Riley Sky, played by Naomi Scott. She's essentially the thing that works the most about this film. The Academy never recognizes horror, so I'm not expecting her to get any type of recognition on that level. But in this film, she absolutely deserves it. If she did, I wouldn't be surprised because the performance warrants it. Obviously, Riley Sky in the story is a famous artist, and I won't spoil anything, but they kind of go into her backstory and some of the events in her life, and she's dealing with trauma, previous drug use, and dealing with her fame, all basically at the same time. And once the demon entity essentially comes into the fold, that really sets up for some very tense and very interesting scenarios for her character to work with. And, just some of the things in this film that she has to do and what she goes through was just some of the best acting that I've seen at all this year. So very high praise for me for her performance. Like I said, she should get award recognition. If we're basing it off of performance alone, she absolutely deserves it. It would probably be a front runner. But I just know how the Academy works, and I know she probably won't get it, which is very, very disappointing because she is absolutely fantastic in this film and is the main reason, in my opinion, why this film works so well. And then another thing about her character that I really enjoyed is that you don't get this a lot in horror, but her character is just very layered. There's a lot to her. She deals with a lot. She goes through a lot. She's obviously a celebrity and very famous, so she, doesn't feel like she has someone that she can really be human with. And there's, a plot line that gets into that and goes into, specific things in the film that I don't really want to spoil, but the way they wrote this character, which the director writer of this film has to get all the credit in the world. This was to me this was just a much stronger story, a stronger script, and a much stronger main character than what we got in that first film. And yeah, it worked for me very well. Then to kind of piggyback off that, I really have to give, credit to the director writer Parker Finn. Like I said, I liked the first movie. I thought he did a good job with that first movie. But like I said, a lot of the ideas, the world, the lore, everything he established in that first film was just taken to another level in this film. This really seems like this was the movie he wanted to make with this idea, whereas that first one was more of like a kind of a tester, a proof of concept type movie. And everything about this film, from with the directing and the writing, was just great, and it was executed well. This was such a big jump in quality for me from that first film. So, and I think another aspect of this that made this movie so much more effective than that original one is that this one is just like unrelentingly brutal and intense, especially in the back half of the movie. The first half is a little bit more has a little bit more levity and a little bit more lighthearted, just because of the nature of who the main character is, with her being a pop star. You get certain scenes in the first half, but then once this movie hits the ground running around the halfway mark, unrelenting pace. I mean, it just keeps going, and things just keep happening, and it just keeps getting crazy, and revelations keep happening, and really that second half of the movie just like absolutely bumped this movie up a couple of notches for me, with how unrelenting and intense it was in that back half. And the one thing and the one aspect in particular with the lore of this universe now at this point, that was much better and much more effective in it was the scenes, where you have to distinguish between reality and what the demon is trying to make the main character see and think she's experiencing. This movie was much more clever and much more effective with that type of horror than the original was. And that's pretty much all I'm going to go into on that because we have to get into specific spoilers for me to explain more. But that just worked so well for me. And then also, the jump scares were used so effectively that they had in this movie. Not many horror movies or franchises really know how to use jump scares effectively. But this movie did it in a way that I felt was very clever and, very surprising, right? They take a couple moments in the movie where they build up the tension with a scene, and it's a typical cliche moment where you think, oh, well, here comes the jump scare, and then they don't do it. They just kind of let off the gas a little bit. And then instead, they'll go boom and hit you with it at a moment you're not expecting when you've already kind of calmed down and have forgotten that we were even getting to that point. And I just thought that was so effective. And it just made for very, good moments with the jump scares that you don't really see a lot nowadays in horror. I felt like that the first movie did that pretty well, too. But like I said at the beginning, this just takes what that first movie did and just puts it on another level and executes it so much better. And I will say, too, the movie was a little bit more violent than I was expecting. There was violence in that first movie, but I don't feel like it overtly, went for it when it came to gore in that film. But this movie has a couple of different scenes that I'm like, whoa, they're going for it. I just saw Terrifier last week, so I don't think anything when it comes to gore or violence is really ever going to top that. But I was surprised at how much violence and gore that they did implement into this film, and when it gets bloody, it gets bloody, and it worked well for me. And then I felt like also too, because of this movie being so unrelenting and really brutal in that second half, I felt like the movie had a decent enough where it didn't overstay its welcome, sprinkles of humor. And I felt like the moments that they decided to give you humor, I felt like worked really effectively, and it kind of lifted the tension just a little bit. Not enough for it to, be not exhausting of an experience, but I felt like they put the humor in at the perfect moments in the film. And, I felt like that worked. And you didn't really get a lot of that in the original, so that was kind of the new flair of it. So, yeah, that worked well for me as well. And then the last thing I wanted to talk about before I get into my mixed section of this review is the ending of this film leaves the film off in such a great place, and in a place where I am so excited to see where they're going to go with A Smile 3. And yeah, that's pretty much all I can say. The ending I felt is one of the better endings in a horror film that I've seen in quite some time, and I'm very, very excited to see where they're going to go with it. So with all the praising that I've done for this film, I did have to go into a couple things that really weren't negatives for me, that they were just kind of mixed. And the first one isn't really even to do with the actual film itself. It's really to do with the marketing. I feel like both of the films in this series have really had some terrible trailers. Because I look at both trailers for both Smile movies, and I really think they are not an indication of how good of quality both of these films really are. And I don't know if that's because of the nature of the film, because of the way they set up their, horror scenes and scary scenes in the film. They're kind of slow builds, right? If you've seen both movies, you pretty much know what I mean. Like, they take their time when they build up the horror. And I just don't feel like you can really, recreate that in an effective way in like a 2-minute trailer. Because both of these trailers, even for the one for this, like I was going to go see this movie regardless, but I just didn't think the trailers were all that good. And that's kind of a little bit misleading to me because it kind of makes it seem like it's just a typical horror film, and it's not. It's really not. So yeah, that just bugged me a little bit. Not even with the film specifically, just more with the marketing. I just wasn't a huge fan of that. And then another thing is that, like I kind of said before, this film does take a lot of those ideas and specific things that they do in that first film and they kind of do the same thing here. There are scenes that feel a little similar to that first film, but in my opinion, they're done way more effectively. So I didn't necessarily really have a problem with it, but I could see how some people might think it's a little bit repetitive and compare it to that first film and think that they're, kind of copying what they did already in the first. But again, I didn't really have a problem with that. It is something I noticed though. And then the last thing, I do feel like the movie was a bit long. Like I said, that first half of the film, while it was fun, it was energetic. There was some stuff in the first half that I didn't think we necessarily needed. Really, the back half of the movie is like really where it picks up and it really brings you in and gets intense and gets interesting. So I don't necessarily really believe that everything that happens in the first half that we really needed. So it feels a little long in the tooth about halfway through the movie. But then once it kicks up, it basically redeems it for the whole back half and doesn't feel that way, and the pacing gets great. So yeah, that was just another little nitpick that I saw. But outside of that, guys, I had a blast with this film. One of the better theater experiences I've had this year. This is probably a top three, top five film of the year for me. I need to sit on it for a little bit, and then decide if that's what it's going to be. But for a rating, I'm going to give this a 4.5 out of 5 stars. If you were even remotely a fan of the first one, go see this. You're going to love it, especially with a decent sized crowd in a movie theater opening weekend. You're going to love it. I loved it. It's like I had to nitpick really to find any mix or negatives with this film. So, yeah, go see Smile. If you've already seen it, go ahead and comment below. Let me know what you thought about it. And everyone have a great night.